You're listening to the 4-Phase Cycle podcast with your hosts, Dr. Alex and Megan of ZESTY Ginger. If you're looking to naturally balance hormones and learn how to work with your body instead of against it, you've definitely come to the right place. As a duo of an integrative MD and a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner and best friends, we use the 4 phases of the female cycle in combination with functional lab work and mindset practices to transform the lives of the women we work with.
We also have a whole lot of fun along the way. If you're new around here, it's best to start with season 1 before jumping around and plan to roll up your sleeves. Showing up for ourselves and enjoying our lives is what good health is all about. Just a quick reminder though, this information is not intended to diagnose, manage, or treat disease. Always consult with your doctor before making changes.
Hello. Alex here for a podcast episode all about supplements. And a really interesting question is, does what you think about your supplements change how they work? This is a really fun one for me because obviously I nerd out super hard about the central nervous system, right? And how it interfaces with the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual bodies that make up the entire experience of who we are, capitalized who we are. So with that, supplements, people ask us a lot about supplements and we love supplements. I have a supplement cupboard, right? And I have my toolkit and I really like it. Works great for me. I think it's wonderful. Um, there's, I think, a lot of really beautiful things about understanding how your body works and kind of having a toolkit to navigate. However, this is another layer of that toolkit that I think oftentimes is underplayed and undervalued a little bit, actually a lot. And that is how are supplements actually used once they get into the body, dependent on everything else about us, right? If this has been, do your genetics determine how the supplements work? Most people would be like, yeah, cool, that's a totally normal topic. And this is just a different version of that exact same question. It's just asking for a different part of you, can a different aspect of you impact how they're used? Now, my theory from what I understand is that yes, my belief is that yes, what our mental and emotional bodies are doing with that information of like, based on the beliefs that you have and the emotions that you experience as a result of them about a supplement, would then change the input. So, how do we figure out how supplements work? Where supplements, when they're researched for mechanism of action, they are researched and thought about in a controlled environment, right? It is how that supplement acts in as controlled of an environment as you can, so that you can really start to isolate and figure out what it's doing, right? And where it's acting. And that's great. I don't, at least from what we have currently available, I don't necessarily know how else we would do it. However, then what people do is then we say, once you get the mechanism of action and we know how that works, then, even though there's research for efficacy in people, sometimes there's not, depending on the supplement, when they look into that, they're also controlling a lot of things, right, of it. And then it's used in the general population. And when we're explaining how supplements work, we still go back to those controlled environments because that's what we've assessed for, right? That's how we make the determination. However, in reality, then it becomes that people are using them not in a control environment, and then all of them goes into account for how it gets processed, because the mechanism of action, like, a certain nutrient or a certain compound acting on mitochondria, if you take that supplement, you could still say that that's how that supplement would work. It would impact the mitochondria, and that's how it does its thing. The question, though, then becomes, are you certain, based on all the other factors about you, that it got to the mitochondria, right? Or that if it did the body use it, recognize it appropriately? Did it have the resources to have the mitochondria respond? And even if the mitochondria responded, then how did that get shipped out to the rest of the body and utilized, right? Or broken down or processed or whatever it is. That's just one example. But you can start to see how, when you consider that, that is a different thing than saying, yeah, that's how that supplement works. It's true, that is how that supplement works. And yet that doesn't mean that today at 2 p.m. with where I am right now, it's going to work like that for me. And so there's lots of factors that go into it. And one of them, people talk about genetics all the time. People talk about even things like stress, right? Stress will change how nutrients are utilized. You've probably heard that. So this is not a new concept. However, for mental things like what do you actually think about that supplement, I think also gets taken into account for the exact same reason. Because that is the instructions that the brain are also carrying out. So let me give you an example. This is where people are like, I was told that XYZ, Vitex is great for my PCOS, right? And then you go and you read about Vitex, and you hear, oh, well, Vitex causes release of histamine. In your head, you're like, oh no, I have a histamine problem, right? It's going to kick off my histamine. So now you're standing there with the Vitex, right? And you're going to take it. And part of you is like, yeah, that's totally going to help. And the other part of you is like, this is going to make me worse. It's going to kick off my histamine stuff. Therefore, the brain is going to listen to both of those, and that's what it's carrying out, right? It's an application of, if you set something, it's going to look for that. And we can have two different things. And sometimes, when it comes to medications or things or foods, right, there can be a lot of, I used to think this is bad, now I heard it's good, I'm going to start eating the food. But in the back of your head, you're like, but I thought this was bad for me, right? Those kind of things. And so it's not that in and of itself is damaging, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be. That is just what it is. It's a neutral thing. You just have had experiences, you have different beliefs and understandings, and as they shift, sometimes things will kind of be at odds, or there's going to be a turnover period. That portion is absolutely fine. What really ends up playing out as, though, is that oftentimes we see people trying to force themselves to keep doing something that they don't believe is good for them, but they heard or want to believe is good for them. And therefore they're like, I will make myself do it anyways, right? And it's at that point where there can be the best supplement ever. And Megan and I have talked about this, and if you were to come to us and we were like, this is literally the most magical supplement in the world for your specific problem, and we could say that completely, no hesitation, totally honestly. If you came to us and said, I think that supplement is harmful to me, what we would respond with is that then maybe it's not the right thing for you. Now, we could, there could be 10 years worth of research about how great it is. There could be all the reasons in the world. Every other person on the planet could be using that. It could be the greatest thing since sliced bread. And yet, if you're holding something and you're looking at it and you're about to put it in your mouth and your own brain is like, this is going to hurt me, right? You have to consider where you're at with that. Right? It's not a reflection of the supplement per se, because like I just illustrated, there could be a scenario where like everyone thinks it's amazing. And if you don't, that the central nervous system, that it's only you in there, right? That's who's in charge. If what everyone else said mattered enough, then we would all generally, go with each other. But for each individual person, there is that stuff, right? And so it doesn't matter how great other people think it is, then, is that the best thing for you right now? And with this whole discussion, the other thing to keep in mind is that that can change over time, right? And so it's really just a question of asking ourselves, where am I at with it right now? Is this conceptually good, but I actually think it's going to hurt me, therefore, do I want to do it now? Is this the best use of the time and the resources for this when I don't really think that it's good for me? And then working on it. And then you can reapproach it later. And then if you never want to reapproach it, that's totally fine. Right? This is where authority and autonomy become really, really important. And really, the flip side is also true. And for this, you've probably seen a lot of examples where we all can agree that something's bad, and then there's people doing it and they're like, good, right? So again, that part gets complicated. But really, for this is an empowerment conversation, because it can kind of be like, oh well, my thoughts determine it, and sometimes we don't love the responsibility of it. The flip side, though, is that it really does highlight how much we are in control of this kind of thing, and the fact that our physical bodies are going to react to that and follow the instructions as we are giving them. Therefore, it really does bring it back to your own authority. What do I think about this? What are my thoughts and my beliefs around it? How good do I feel about it? Is this something I want to do? And even if there's some bumps along the road of learning how to navigate that and addressing beliefs and all of that stuff, that is all stuff you can figure out. That's all just things to do, right? And at the root of it, then, we are reclaiming our own sovereignty of what is going to be the best for me. And if my beliefs don't match with what I want, then I can acknowledge that, make the decision for what needs to happen right now, and then move forward in beginning to rewire our brains and our central nervous system, our belief patterns, our thought patterns, our habits around this new way of being. Then we have the option to change it for the future and modify that. And the body responds to that as well, right? So you're not ever locked into it per se, but you are actually more important than to the process than I think as a society we get told we are, right? We're kind of like, that's how the supplement works. And it's never taken into account of, well, it's not never taken, but minimally taken into account what system it goes into. It's the same for calories in, calories out, right? If that worked, all our bodies would look the same. What we forget to notice is that the system that the calories are going in and out from will determine the response overall. And the same thing can be true here as we direct what our body does through the interface of our brain and wiring and chemical messengers being released, and that leading to thoughts and beliefs and actions. All of those things then are much more you centric than external to you. So that's something to be celebrated for. And it's also just something to check in for those of us. I wish that back in the day when I had the supplement graveyard that someone would have asked me this, right? And had me consider, because I think, the experience I ultimately had was I stood there in front of those and thought, my goodness, I don't even want, I don't even want some of these, right? I was just doing it because it was like the right thing to do for whatever I read that, recently. And then it becomes a big weight off. You can start to reevaluate from a place of authority for yourself. And man, if that doesn't change the game. All right, so chew on that. Take a screenshot of this podcast episode and tag me with your thoughts. I'd love to hear about this. This is a biggie, and people tend to have a lot of thoughts come up about this. And it's something I'd like to make more podcast episodes about. So I'd love for you to share what comes up for you, and then I will address it and make more podcast episodes. All right, have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for coming out to hang with us on the podcast. It is our goal to transform the way women are treated in healthcare, and we need your help. We need your help to get the word out. We have a lofty goal of 1 million downloads, and we know that as this podcast grows, we're going to be able to reach more women, get more amazing speakers for you, and bring the most cutting-edge information.
If you found these pod classes helpful, please take a moment to text 5 women you know the link to the series. We appreciate your help so much. Can't wait to see you next time.